Well, welcome everybody to this Evangelism and Growth Team webinar. My name's Emma Nash, I'm from the Evangelism and Growth Team, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Bevelled Botting, who's the Head of Research and Statistics at the Church of England, and Rachel Jordan-Wolfe, the Executive Director of Hope Together. Bev and Rachel are going to be presenting some research to us, really exciting research that's recently been done into churchgoing during the pandemic. Bev's going to introduce explain to us how it was done. Rachel's going to dig into some of the findings a little bit more. And then towards the end of our time together, we're going to be reflecting on what should we do as a result of this new information. So I'm going to spotlight Bev rather. Bev, thanks so much for being with us. Bev, have I given your job title correctly?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you, Emma.
That's great. So I'm going to remove myself from the screen. We want to hear from you and not me today. And I'll run you PowerPoint. So if you just let me know when you'd like your next slide.
Okay, thanks very much, Emma. And thank you so much for inviting me along today. It's a real delight to be with you and to be sharing these findings. So what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be sharing with you some of the research, talking a bit about the figures. Obviously, you'd expect that from me. But in a sense, I think the key thing that I want to share is that we have to come up with estimates of numbers, but all our work is done on the basis of samples, and sometimes that can get down to quite small numbers of people. So we have to start doing estimates. And in a sense, what we try and do is not get too hung up on the actual numbers themselves, but just an indication. And with these figures, there's such opportunities and things that we can learn from, that's what I hope will be the key messages that we share through. So first of all, Emma, if you could go to the next slide, just want to share with you a bit about how we did this research. We worked with a company called Savanta Comres, who are one of the leaders in faith research. They did an online poll and managed to contact just over 3,500 adults, so aged 18 plus in England. Now I'm aware that obviously with Methodists, you do cover the whole of Britain, but actually this work was England, and they were surveyed online for 2 weekends. And from those, we found that just over half, but let's say roughly half were Christian, and then about another 40% said they had no religion. So that's really about 90% of population. Those of other faiths were excluded in the following analysis, because obviously we're talking about church going and so on, and they would have their own different practices. So we're following here about 90% of the population. Next slide, please, Emma. Okay, now the first thing we wanted to do was to understand from these people what their church-going habits were before COVID hit, before the pandemic caused all the various restrictions and upheavals we've all seen over the last year and a bit. Now, just again, thinking about that 90% group, so we've excluded those of other faiths. About a fifth of those who said they were Christian or of no religion said they attended church regularly. Now, by that, we mean at least monthly. So, yeah, we all have to stop and think about, is that what we all mean by regular? But we have to take a definition. That's the definition we've taken here. Now, we estimate in the Church of England from statistics we collect from all our churches, we've got a 1.1 million worshipping community. And that's thought to represent about a quarter of all Christian churchgoers. So therefore, we would probably be expecting it to be about 11 or 12% attending regularly. So you might think, oh, well, that 21% looks a bit high. It does look a bit high, but actually I'm not particularly worried by that. I think there are lots of reasons why in surveys people tend to overstate a bit of what they do. It's not because they're lying, and they're not, it's just that actually we're looking at the fact that They may intend to go monthly, but maybe the figures that we have, which show actual attendance, may show that some of these people are actually probably attending 7 or 8 times a year instead of the 12 they think they are. So again, we're not going to worry too much about that. We are always checking on the data reliability, but that we're quite happy that the sample we've got and being able to estimate from it. Next slide, please. So if we know that we've got about a fifth of all people saying they attend a church regularly, those are, we then had a little look to see what we could find out about people by age. And it's quite an interesting one, actually, because the people, particularly, and I mean, it's something we hit in the Church of England quite a lot, and I don't know how this affects a Methodist, but we have what we call nominal people who will tend to say that they are Christian, and but actually not tend to go to church very often. And what's really interesting is that this tends to be an age-related thing. And so what we can see is those people who are 65 and over and say they're Christian, only about 10% of them regularly attend. Whereas for the younger ones, and under 24s we've got here, even though numerically they're a smaller number, if they say they go regularly and they say they're a Christian, they're much more likely to. So it shows that this nominalism is much more with older age groups. And I find that really interesting in terms of the outreach and so on to younger people. So if they say they're Christian and they're under 35, they are much more likely to attend regularly. Next slide, please. Okay, so we had an idea of how many people said that they came to church beforehand, bit of some of the demographics around age. So what happened then during lockdown? Our churches were closed, and I think at that point what we saw was an absolutely amazing ability of clergy and those working in our churches to be able to suddenly from nowhere provide amazing worship online. And of course, what we actually found was that those people who previously had been very regularly attending our churches, most of them, just under 90%, actually were regularly attending online. Sometimes that might be something provided by their local church. Sometimes it might be something provided nationally. I know in the Church of England, churches that were unable to provide local online worship would often refer people to another big church or maybe a cathedral. But overall, 90% of our regular worshippers were attending online regularly. There were about 9% who didn't attend online church at all. And that may be for lots of different reasons. They may not have the technology. They may not have had the confidence to be able to work with that. But the one part of this slide I'd really like you to look at is those people who never came to church regularly before. And what we see is that 4% of people who said they were Christian or had no religion, who previously had never attended church regularly, suddenly, when the online material is there and they can go to online worship, they began to attend online worship regularly. And that is absolutely amazing. It meant that at a point where we were thinking, can we survive? Can we provide things? There were people who previously had not engaged with us who were able to find something that really just hit the spot. And that could be ecumenically up to 300,000 people. It's a huge, huge number. I can't picture in my head what 300,000 people would look like. Next slide, please. And those people who were engaging with us online regularly, and we said, well, okay, it's good, during lockdown, maybe there's not much else you can do. You've engaged with us. But what do you actually intend to do afterwards? What do you intend to do when we move through this pandemic and we start to be able to open our churches again, and we start to be able to offer our in-person services again? And what was really interesting was that there were some people who previously used to come in person along to our church buildings, and they have come back and said, actually, I found this being able to attend online really helpful. And we have other people who can't wait to get back in person. We've got people who previously attended, and actually some of them are now saying, I'm not sure I'm coming back. And what we obviously, perhaps it's not too surprising, a lot of people who haven't engaged with us regularly online maybe have felt a bit out of the loop and have got out of the practice of regular worship with others, and so are thinking maybe they won't return regularly. But we do have a big group of people who are saying that they want to continue to engage online, and others who maybe had only engaged with us online for the first time might make that step through and meet us in person, which would be amazing. Thank you. Next slide, please. So let's start by thinking about those people who are joining. So these are the people who previously didn't attend church regularly, but during lockdown, our online church that we've been offering has had something that's really enabled them to develop their faith journey. Maybe not surprisingly, half of them are quite young, aged under 35. And moving forward, most of them plan to attend both online and in person. But actually, it's really important. It's not just online. It's not that they were comfortable just online. Actually, half of them, most of them, would quite like to meet us too. And this could be, as I said previously, 300,000 people ecumenically. And even though, obviously, we know there's a bit of wobble in these figures because people tend to overstate their intentions, that's still a really large number of people who we haven't met in person yet, who've come along and found something that has really just hit the spot for them, and they want to take that faith journey further on. It's a huge opportunity. Next slide, please. As I said previously, though, there are some people, and it's about 1 in 10 of our pre-COVID regular people, who don't intend to come back regularly. And that could similarly equate for, excuse me, about 300 people ecumenically, again, with some wobble around that. So one of the things we wanted to try and understand is what kind of people were these that we might lose. And one of our fears were that we might lose disproportionately more of our families. We could find hypotheses as to why this might be the case, but actually that's not the whole story. About a third of those people who said they didn't plan to come back regularly came on their own. About 1 in 5 came with children, with or without another adult, and about half came with another adult only. So yeah, there are some families in there, but that's not the whole story. It's a real mix of people across all demographics. Next slide, please. So in summary, we know that people do overstate positive behaviours, in other words, saying that they intend to, and we all know that when we join the gym after Christmas or whatever, we all intend to, we just don't necessarily go that often. But actually an awful lot do. And so even if the people who say they plan to come monthly, maybe they won't come monthly, but even if they came every 6 to 8 weeks, that is a huge missional opportunity. And these are people who are actually often starting their their faith journeys, for whom coming to church and meeting people can be a huge opportunity. And those people who we think we may lose, again, we're doing some research now to with a group of people who have indicated that they may not come back. We want to find out more as to what is it that's meaning that some of these people may not wish to come back. But I think we've got huge challenges and a huge missional opportunities. We have new people who'd never attended church before, who have, through online worship, been able to engage with our churches. And that is amazing. I don't think any of us would have really anticipated that at the point when we're all rushing around trying to work out how to do church online. So those are the figures that we found, the key messages. And I'm going to pass over now to Rachel, who's going to talk through a little bit more about how we can take these figures, learn from them, and put them into action. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Bev. Great to be with you. It's been fantastic to be part of this research. It's ecumenical figures, and we've done it ecumenically, but been great to have Bev and that strong research input from the C of E. Love all working together. So next slide, Emma, be great. So with my, if you like, mission hat on, particularly, what can we take out of this? So again, some of these things will be a bit of a repeat, but then I guess we'll be looking at what we can do about it. So the joiners, these are people who intend to attend regularly online, in person, who previously were not part of the worshipping community. The big news here, as Bev said, is that 50% of these adults are aged under 35, which is massive. And if we nurture this group, we could see a lot more people, maybe even 300,000 people coming to church in mixed mode. And that's really important, is don't switch off. Number one headline, please don't switch off what you're doing online. The knee-jerk reaction for all of us is, oh, let's get back to normal. Phew, we survived. We don't have to do this anymore. I don't like all those leads and those plugs. But the big news here is that we reach these people online and we need to stay online. And I've heard, you know, again, anecdote, just some church leaders who just thought, oh, we need to switch this off. So we'll dwell a bit more on that in a bit. But we need to, that's my big headline. If you hear nothing else from me today, don't switch off your online. That would be my big main message. So that's why it's important, because some say they only want to attend with us online. Now, our dream is that we could get them on to come and meet some people in person, but it does mean we've got a question of, what does online church look like? What does online discipleship look like? That's the big question. What does discipleship look like for these people? If you want to chat about some of those questions, we did a webinar on hybrid church. I did that with the EA and with Churches Together in England. That is up on the Hope Together website. I can give that to Emma to send round. So if you want to chat more, look at that. We need to look at what it means to do hybrid well. Because if you see 15%, that's a lot, say they intend to stay online. So we do dream that they might come, but we do need to know that some people, we've got to think of what online discipleship looks like. And we've talked to some people who've been doing this for a long time. So one guy called Matt Smith has run an offline and an online church together for 10 years. And so he's got a lot of learning of what that looks like and how he could help us to make hybrid the best it could possibly be. 10% of adults who previously attended regularly don't intend to return, and 1 in 5 of these is families. So that means there's quite a lot of people attached, because if that person doesn't come and their family doesn't come, that's a lot of people attached. That's a lot of people that could walk out of the back door. We all know this in church, don't we? We have this great front door and we have a back door. And sometimes it feels like you're trying to bring people in the front, and just as fast as someone's coming in the front, someone's dropping off the back. And the reason this research is so valuable is we may not have noticed that. We might have come out of the pandemic and had very similar figures for our churches. And we might not have realised that a whole group of people joined us and another whole group of people left. And so doing this research has shown us the front, the in and the out has happened during the pandemic, and that we need to keep an eye on both of those. And it's fascinating that the Christians under age of 35 attend more regularly. That's really positive news for us. Can I have the next slide, Emma? So let's have a little specific look about the younger generations for a moment. There's something about the 18 to 24-year-olds and max up to the 35-year-olds. So we're doing bottom end, we're doing Gen Z and the bottom end of the millennials, really. Top end Gen Z, bottom end millennials. What's going on in that age bracket and what's happened to them during this pandemic? Well, the big thing is, of course, they're digital natives. So unlike me, who is having to learn a lot of things and has learned a lot during the pandemic, this group of people lived online. They breathe online. I mean, if you've got anything to do with any of them, you know that. You know, I could give you 1,000 examples of how my nephew will go, "Why are you doing it that way?" And then sort of grabs your device and goes, "There we are." And you're like, "Oh," because I'm not a digital native, so I have to learn it. But of course, because they're digitally native, when the church is totally missional, the church spoke their language on a massive scale. And we have seen a massive result. By going online, we began to speak in the language of a digital native. And therefore, they could hear us for the first time. And it didn't matter how much we did whatever else we did before, they couldn't hear us because we were speaking our language. We were doing it in our way, and it didn't make sense to them. And by going online, we've had to learn. It's like we've been forced on that missional journey to speak their language and to do it their way. But the response has been they've been able to come and join us. Overwhelmingly, the response of the experience of people who have visited us online during this pandemic has been positive. I think that's really important. We get such negative press so often. But overwhelmingly, when people have joined us online, they've liked what they've seen. They've liked us. They've liked the church that they've experienced online. They've been overwhelmingly positive. We asked a few questions in this group. Some, it's wonderful, were able to say they've come to faith during the pandemic. Often that's, I mean, I don't know if you've followed Nikki Gumbel, who said, you know, Alpha, we have to eat our words, don't we, sometimes? Alpha will never go online. And now Nikki Gumbel says Alpha will never not be online. And that's because he's seen what has happened during the pandemic. So many people have come to faith. We've seen that in our church. I'm going to go anecdotal. I know this is big numbers, but sometimes it helps. One girl has joined our church who joined it. She was 3 months online. She spent 3 months online and now she's come to join us. Another girl, she came 1 week online and then she came to join us. And it's the first time. I think she may have got some church way back in her background, but she was actually in church on Sunday, and it was just what a joy. And I had lunch with the two of them just the other day. They're going to join my midweek group, but it's happened because we went online. They genuinely would not be in our church if we had not been online and they hadn't stumbled upon us. And so I think, have I got why they came? I'm just checking. So just some of the things that they really, what did they love? We've looked at we did ask some questions of these people. We asked some questions of the 4% as to why they came and joined us. And I want to give you just a few differences. So the ones who came to faith are younger because they are in that younger age bracket. If they were older and have come, they've often come back to church. So the pandemic made some of our older generations who would have said they were Christian, reach out and come and join us. The pandemic made some of the younger generations who'd got no experience of church come and join us for the first time. And we also had this interesting group, didn't we, Bev, of people from other faiths who came to join us online or said that they did. And we were trying to work them out. I've dug a little bit deeper into them. And I think they say that they came for community, but they don't they don't tick any of the boxes for coming to find out about God. They just tick around community and getting to know someone. So that's very interesting. The younger group tick around questions about faith and spirituality and getting to know us. So they want community. They want to know someone, and somebody. That's what they're coming for. And the older group, more of them have cut. They're Christians, they already know what they think about God, but they've come back to join us again, mostly for community, which is fascinating because we maybe wouldn't have thought that online would be the place you would look for community. But this is the place that they're looking for community. So we need to not take that away from them. So spiritual interest and a digital generation. Can I have the next slide, please, Emma? Some things we can learn. What can we learn about this generation and being online? When you are leading a service, especially now that we're back in the building, the temptation, if you are back in the building, the temptation would be to forget these people because you can't see them. But it's really important to think about how to design a service that is suitable for the people who are either going to watch it online at that moment or watch it later if you've posted it on YouTube or Facebook. Think of them, almost picture one of them. They're likely to be younger, they're likely to be a digital native, and they're likely to have questions about Christian faith. They're likely to not have a clue, for example, about the books of the Bible. It's a bit like you kind of always got to have that evangelistic edge in what you're doing. Don't take anything for granted. They might not know how church works. It's as if you've got a new front row sitting in front of you. They've never read the Bible. They don't know which end is up, and they've not had this experience before. You need to give them a lot more explanation and help to go through. A lot of people have had to cut their service down because people don't want a long church service. So making sure that the time is shorter. In our church, we have less worship music because that just doesn't translate to what's when you're watching it online. It doesn't work in the same way. So instead, we might have a video element that we put into the service. We might show a video from somewhere because that works if you're at home or if you're in the building. And then the next big thing is connection. Always trying to get them to connect with you. You're trying to get somebody. It's a bit like if they had arrived at church. You desperately want to know who they are, what their number, what will they come back again? What's their name? What are they like? How can you connect with them? So connection. So this is at the beginning of the service, maybe partway through the service, saying we'd love to hear from you. Why don't you put? I don't know if you have chat. Put in the chat who you are, or email in if you'd like to be part of one of our small groups. That's what we've seen in our church. So from a personal, I know it's anecdote response, we've seen a lot of people sign up to midweek groups because we keep saying, if you want community during this time, sign up to one of these groups. And that's what those two girls did that have now joined my group. They thought, yeah, actually, I want to know some people. And that's because people are hungry for connection. So seeker friendly, that's what I was saying. Imagine them on the front row. Getting interactive, that's like, please talk to us in the chat. Please leave your name. We'd love to know who you are. Thank you for joining us. Imagining those people in the room. Requesting prayer, that can help, that they could get in touch with you for a prayer request. And then a lot of people have seen, lots of people come on the small group online experience, the Alpha. We've been doing the wellbeingjourney.org from Hope. That's an easy ask. How's your well-being going? We've all got a bit of well-being issue at the moment. We've just been through a pandemic. So running a well-being journey, we've seen that that's really helped. People can, different churches have done that, and that's got a community pull. It's quite an easy ask. So always giving somebody a next step. Great. Can I have the next slide, Emma? Those who are staying. What did we learn about the people who aren't leaving? They're quite important, aren't they? We're really glad. People who aren't leaving. We learned that they had regular spiritual personal habits that can sustain their faith. It's really important. So it's that classic thing of discipleship. Much more like to stay if you could sustain your faith, maybe through reading the Bible regularly, regular prayer. They're the people who stayed, and the people with less of that habit are more likely to have left us. And those who were connected, so again, this sense of community group, small group, whatever, those groups less likely to have lost, because it's so much more obvious if somebody leaves your online midweek group than if they leave your online church. It's the same as if the church was in person. It's easier to spot somebody who leaves a midweek group or a home group than it is to spot somebody who's just left your church. It's the same principles. And so there's something there about deepening discipleship that has helped people to stay. Those who are leaving, what can I tell you about? Oh no, that's those. What's the next slide, Emma? Those who are leaving. What's happened? Why have people left us? Some people just didn't probably have the ability to do Zoom. I found that some people aren't online. You know, that's difficult for them. But approximately this big group have left, but we did think it might be. We went in with hypotheses to test. Was it more families? Because it's really hard to get your small children to like watch a service online. That's not very engaging for them. But actually, as Bev said, it's across the whole. And there were lots of different answers. We came up with a whole pile of reasons why we thought people might leave, and they said yes to lots of them. So I can't give you a single answer. If we just did this, these people would have stayed. There isn't one of those. Some, literally, the pandemic made them ask deep spiritual questions. They lost their faith. Others, do you know what? They found something they preferred to do on a Sunday. You know, rock up, maybe spending time with their friends and family, and they've decided that spending time with their friends and family going forward is more important than coming to join us. So we can't give you a silver bullet answer, but we're hoping in our next piece of research, where we're going to do some qualitative work with these people, to maybe dig a bit deeper and find a little bit more out on this. If you have got a list of people who've drifted away, I don't, phone them. If you do let me see, is it on the next slide? Yeah, just do the next slide. It's fine, Emma. We think the most important thing, these are three groups that we have lost. We've lost children and families, youth, and the elderly. I don't know, since we've gone back into the building, this is personal, it's anecdotal. We did lose our children and families when we went online. It was almost impossible for people with 3 small children to try to juggle Sunday worship on a TV screen. It didn't work at all. But they have come back when we've opened up our buildings. So this is a personal anecdote. So that's good. So some of them who'd left, who were children and families, have come back now that there's children-friendly things that they can bring their children to. Youth, we discovered that a lot of young people were really struggling with online. How are you doing with Zoom? You've turned up to a webinar. We're thrilled, but let's be honest, we're all a little zoomed out, aren't we? And I think that happened on a massive scale to our young people when school went online. After they'd done school online, they didn't want to come online for their for a youth group. So the most important thing there was, as soon as possible, to get back into contact with them. So going for a walk with them, taking them out for a hot chocolate, getting some things in that do personal contact. And for the elderly, again, some of them just can't do the digital. So the Church of England provided like the telephone service for them, which has really helped, because there's something that they can do and they can make contact. But with all of these things, the one thing we've learned is that making contact is most important. That's great from Helen. Yeah, some people we've regained, though people who some of that 4% who've come back will be people who couldn't come to church physically, who've loved us being online. And actually that's another reason for us to stay online, is if someone is disabled, if they're housebound, suddenly again they feel part of our church community, and that is life-giving and another great reason not to switch off. I'm going to suggest that we let me just do, if you go to the next one, I'll do these really quickly. Youthscape, this is just backing up what I said about youth. They found a lot of young people just didn't want to do youth provision online, and they'd had a real lack of engagement. Again, anecdotally, our youth have begun to come back now that we're in the building, and they just loved it when they just got that personal chance to go for a walk with someone. So can I do next slide, Emma? Contact is key. I think that's, so if you hear 2 things today, don't switch off, and personal contact is key. So well, actually not just personal contact, but on youth, it is knowing who's dropped off and how to make contact with them again, and it's that personal touch that brings them back. Slide 18, I'm just going to pop through these at speed because we're running out of time on us talking. Children and families, it's very similar with children and families. We have seen some amazing things. I know one guy who's a pioneer who took his mother and toddler group. He saw how important mother and toddlers was from another piece of research called Talking Toddlers. He took it over And he went online during the pandemic, and he's grown his toddler group from 50 to 90 during the pandemic, because he was doing this great little talking toddler, just doing this great little show, if you like, and doing Bible stories and songs. And that's really grown his group. So there are ways to do children's stuff, but needing to be interactive. So that's important. But again, do you know, the families where you just haven't seen them for a while, the most important thing is, can you call them up? Can you message them? Can somebody pop round? We saw people giving out parcels and things, sending craft activities home people to families, so that they actually could just do a Christian craft at home, even if they couldn't come online. Anything that gave that contact, that's kept people really connected and involved. Can we do the next slide, please, Emma? Again, this is, I think, really being in touch with people, with the elderly. How comfortable are they about coming back? Even if when we do open our buildings, how comfortable are they about coming back into the building? So again, just doing a little bit of work to work out who's comfortable to come back and how we might give them that confidence that it is a safe space. But obviously don't push people. If people don't want to, another reason why we need to remain online. So again, it's all about contacting and finding out how we can help them. Emma, can I have the next slide, please? We have a great job, don't we, to feed the lambs, tend the sheep and look after them. I know it's hard work, people, and I know some of you who are in these roles and responsibilities are probably quite exhausted yourselves already, because going through the pandemic has been a rough run for all of us. And so again, to hear, if you like, hear that call on us to look after the people in our care. And one of the big things we can do is to contact them, but to remain online. And alongside this verse, I'd like to put the parable of the 99, that we also need to go and look after that one sheep. And many of those one sheep we have found and are able to get in touch with because we go online. Can I have the final slide, Emma? So contact is critical. This is contact with the people who've drifted away, and contact with the people who are new to us online. Every time somebody hits your church online, you probably have quite a short window to pull in their attention and get them to go from having dropped in to staying with us further. So there's two bits of contact there. Nurture. I just think getting people into small groups so that they are nurtured and glued in is really key at this time. It's key to know how they're doing. It's key to know if they're well enough. It's key to know if they're with us or if they're not. So I think that's really important. Well-being, we all know that's massive. It's had a big impact. If the well-being journey might help you, that's been run in lots of churches, actually both for the church small groups first, because it builds and encourages them, or you can run it as a Sunday series in your sermons to help people look at their well-being, or in a really exciting way, like we're taking it out into the community. You can run it in community groups and actually serve your community. And I know that we're now likely to be able to gather. That's just on the increase, isn't it? Being able to welcome people back into the building, which is so super exciting. So in summary, my two main points after all of that are this. Please stay online. It's really important, both missionally and actually pastorally. And wherever possible, you're getting people online to make contact with you and you're making contact with them. But also for both leavers and joiners, as much contact as, I know it's a big job, but to do as much contact as possible. And obviously, are there other people in the church? So obviously, are there midweek group leaders, home group leaders that can do that contact for you, so that we know who's gone, and just that call and that care to bring them back in if they've left, and that call and that care to get in contact with them and lead them through if they've joined us online. Thank you, Emma.
Rachel, thanks so much. And thanks to Bev. I'm now going to spotlight all of us together. And then it'd be great to just spend a little bit of time talking about what we've just heard. So I'm just looking for Bev so I can add her spotlight too. Fantastic. Thank you both so much, not only for giving us a really in-depth understanding of the research, but also giving us so many helpful pointers about what we might do as a result of the research. So Rachel, your two big things that your two big takeaways from us, let's check that I've remembered correctly. So I wrote down, don't stop digital and make contact with as many people as possible. That's so helpful. Thank you. And And Bev, the headlines, in terms of sort of the headline figures, people to take away, what would be the sort of 2 or 3 big hitters, big things that struck you?
Well, I think for me, it's, Rachel's comment about the front door and the back door. And the point that both doors are so important. We have unprecedented numbers likely to be coming through our doors for the first time. Nurture them, look out for them, welcome them. Welcome is so important. We know from the research there's likely to be a really good number of those. But also, please put somebody at the back door. Please don't just let people drift away, because we know that we've all of our churches have seen numbers slowly going down over the years. It's likely to be about a decade's worth of loss this year. And actually, please put somebody on the back door, because knowing that, let's also invest some of our time in trying to understand why people are less likely to come, and maybe there are things we can do and we can make them feel loved and welcome.
That's great. Thank you so much. So we've had a couple of questions come into the Zoom chat. Folks, do continue to pop your questions in the chat, and I've made a note of some of them. So there was just a clarification. So Bev, the stats are not just about the Church of England, are they? They were people who attended all kinds of services.
Yeah, so this is completely ecumenical. It's for people who said they were Christian or none. It's not looking at specific denominations at all.
That's great, but it was England only, not involving Wales, Scotland, Ireland. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So really wide application, certainly for Methodists, which is really exciting. So someone was asking, when people said that they worshipped online, do we know, did they mean live online worship, pre-recorded services? Am I right in thinking it could have been a variety of things? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question enabled people to tick a number of different boxes about what they'd done and how regularly they had done these things. So there was online worship provided by local churches, online worship provided as national resources, but then there were also things like television programs, radio programs, having Rachel mentioned the phone-in services. I mean, they've been absolutely amazing lifeline for people for whom the kind of online stuff is a bit outside their skill base. Even for some people where they emailed worship sheets, a friend of mine in their church, they emailed worship sheets, and at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, although they weren't together, they were together in spirit, because they all sat with a cup of coffee reading through their worship sheet. So there were lots of different ways that people were creatively offering some form of church that people could engage with.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks so much for clarifying that. Rachel used the interesting comment there. There was, well, you've said many interesting things, but you talked about community online. And that really interested me, because we can sometimes dismiss digital as being a bit superficial. Maybe some of us, perhaps those of us who are a bit older, don't see how it could create community, but actually we found that people were finding community online.
Yeah, so people would join us looking for community, and they you know how it's because they come each week, they get to know people, so they get to recognize who you are, who someone else is. By the time they rock up, they feel they know everybody, which is quite interesting. That was one thing that intrigued me. They feel they belong to you because they've seen you so regularly. But much more than that, the Zoom group, here we are. If we did this, if 5 of you got together regularly on Zoom, you'd really get to know each other well. So the churches that do hybrid and have done it for 10 years and have done it well, what they do is they do really good chat when you arrive, really good welcome online as well as offline, and they're trying to get people into either an online community group. So basically you can run a midweek group on Zoom with somebody from Manchester, somebody from Edinburgh, and somebody from Truro if you wanted to, and they could actually meet every week. They could study the Bible, they could pray. Now then you could get them to get to know some of their people. They can apply their mission where they are, and maybe bring someone else along who could start with on Zoom. But what they found is they ended up with what they call microsites. So if the person in Edinburgh then found 2 other friends, actually they become a little prayer triplet. And actually then they might get 10 of them who meet in a living room, but they're part of the church that's actually meeting in Birmingham, but they watch it in where did I have them? They watch it in Edinburgh. Does that make sense? So what they were growing is you might start with these communities online, and often then it gets a bit blurry, the online and the offline. But for some people, it's always online, because they for example might be housebound, and therefore online, particularly in this pandemic, that might be their gift. So I think it's flexing, isn't it? It's flexing what we think of as how people can do community. But online community has grown in the pandemic, and we can help by doing that as church.
That's great. That's great. We've not had that many questions come in. Some really interesting comments from people. Thank you so much. We've got Bev and Rachel for another just under 15 minutes. So now is your time to fire your questions at them. Do put them in the Zoom chat and I'll pose your questions to them. I have plenty of questions, so I can just keep going. But if you want to make sure I ask the questions you want answers to, then do pop them in the Zoom chat. I just a bit of a curveball question, perhaps. I'd love to know from Bev and Rachel, what have been the things you have found most helpful in terms of your worship life, discipleship life during the pandemic? What's really sort of fed you?
Shall I kick off first, Rachel? Interestingly, you see, I moved house in November, and I didn't actually move that far away. It's about a quarter of an hour, 20-minute drive away. But for me, being online was absolutely fab, because I could still continue to connect with all those people who I'd grown and loved in the church where I lived before. And so that was just really nice. It was that sense of I was somewhere new, and yet there were people that I was still engaging with in my faith journey, my faith life. But then at the same time, because I do have a friend here and I actually know somebody else at the local church, they picked up that I'd moved. And so little parcels began appearing at the front door, and a bag at Christmas and a bag at just for Ash Wednesday with and a palm cross when it was Palm Sunday, and all sorts of things. And so actually for me, that whole thing about transitions and moving, I know that in time I will, as we come out of lockdown, I will transition away from my old church, but actually I'm able to keep in touch with them in a beautiful way. But also I already feel I'm part of the new community. And when I walk through the physical door for the first time in my new church here, it won't feel new, because I know a lot of the people, and I've already developed quite a history. So for me, some of the stuff we've been talking about, I've had a unique opportunity to live through as well. And it really has been incredibly helpful for that sort of transition time.
That's fascinating. Thank you, Bev. Rachel, how about you?
So I've enjoyed, tuning in and watching church. I'm really enjoying being back in the building though, but I did enjoy that. I did feel that I connected, I saw everybody, and that was great. And my midweek group has been amazing. So my midweek group has stood all through the pandemic. We just went on Zoom, we've met when we could. When possible, we've sat shivering outside restaurants or whatever was permitted by law. And then we just went back to Zoom, and we ran, I know it sounds like a flop, but we ran the wellbeing course online together, and oh my word, we had the most amazing time because we talked so deep. And I think that it sounds hilarious, but it was just great. Doing some really deep topics, doing them together, and it really bonded us as a group. So that was great.
That's excellent. That's great to know. We've had a few questions come in, so it's always good to give people some thinking time. So Jackie asks, do we have research on other church engagement, not worship? So it's an interesting question about how the question was posed. So I'd love to hear from you. So she says, for example, social justice engagement, providing to those in need pastoral care. How was the question put? Was it, have you attended online worship or have you attended online church?
Yeah, there was work. Yeah, we were looking at worship and
Right.
intentions. But do watch this space. Well, not this space, but watch the digital space and so on, because again, sort of Anglican churches, but CUF, Church Urban Fund, have been doing one of their updates of the Church in Action survey, and that's going to be released, I believe, tomorrow. And it's actually concentrating on what churches of their social action and how they have responded to community need and engaged in other community need during the pandemic. So I have had early sight of the report, and I would definitely recommend you all have a look at it when it comes out tomorrow.
Tomorrow, fantastic. So that's,
I'm pretty sure it's tomorrow, yeah.
excellent. Great tip. Thanks, Bev. So the Church Urban Fund publishing research tomorrow, folks. Keep your eyes peeled. That's great. Okay, so this research particularly focused on worship, but I guess being a really focused question, you have to narrow it down, don't you?
Yeah.
Paul asks, how do you connect online and in-person congregations? A lot of hybrid church at the moment is simply broadcasting from the building with no interaction from those taking part online. Any thoughts, either Rachel or Bev, about how to do both at the same time?
I think it's why things like obviously shaping your service so that you are thinking about the online as well as the offline, so that the people watching you could be more than the people who are in the space. So just it is things like, it's about shortening, maybe less music, maybe thinking of putting in a video like we're doing here. We video one person in the congregation each week, and you have a "This Is Us" and you find out all about them, just because that works really well both offline and in person, online and offline. And then so that's really important. And the connection thing is like having chat is important if you are online, and asking people to go into the chat, giving people the chance of email addresses. Who can they email if they want a prayer request? Who can they email if they need help with something, so that they've got that opportunity to take it a step further and to get in contact. And I know that so it's not just we personally do we do stream our morning service, and then we create an on-demand service that is really pitched online. So that is done with presenters sitting on chairs. That's where all the intro happens. So you can watch the online demands, that you can watch the stream service, where we're still conscious that people are doing that. So you're always asking if you've come and joined us, you're online, that's great, we're so pleased you're here. But then we curate something, for want of a better term, that is an on-demand thing that you can watch at any point during the week, where you'd still get the same talk, but actually it is not recorded in the building, it is recorded as an online talk. And so that experience is different. It's, for one of it, it's curated for online, and that's the one that
and I think the other thing that we've done successfully is to incorporate our online people in the service that's live streamed. So actually it really isn't that hard to pre-record or have sort of a camera, so that somebody who is watching from home, they can still read prayers, they can still read a reading, and it may be easier technically to pre-record them doing it and then show it, but it makes that really important point that our community is wider than just the people in the physical building.
Yeah, that's great. And then I think it is always that trying to connect people. So whatever you are, whether you're streaming your service or whether you've got an on-demand thing, you're constantly trying, it's contact. You're constantly trying to get people to take a step towards you. And then that might be an online group. So if they do live in Manchester and you're not in Manchester, they could still join your online midweek group if that was a good place fit for them.
Great, thank you both. Really interesting suggestions there. And we've got just a few minutes left. Rachel, you mentioned that there was no one reason why people were not intending to come back to church. There's a whole range of reasons. How about those who joined, that 4% of those who'd never previously gone to church, did regularly during lockdown. Do we have a sense of what it was that made them come along?
Yeah, so it was two things really. It was either they wanted to connect, so they wanted community, and they were looking to the church. So some people were looking to a church near them for that community. Some people were looking for online community, a place they could connect online. And the church was offering community. We were offering a place and space where they could meet other people, either online and offline. Particularly the younger new people, they were asking questions. They wanted to know who God was. They had they were spiritually curious, and we know that from the Lumino research from Biblica that happened pre-pandemic. There is a good chunk of people who we might call the spiritually curious in those younger age brackets, and so they literally came along to find out about God, find out, seeking spiritual answers. And some of them are the ones who've come to faith, which is just fantastic. And then the older group, as I said, they came back. I guess they had something in them meant, I want to come back to church, but it was a long past experience that they'd probably forgotten. And again, they were seeking. So it was either community, and for a lot of people, for the younger age bracket, it had their spiritual curiosity. So community and spiritual curiosity.
That's great. Thank you both so much. We're almost at the end of our time together. We probably can't say too much about the details, but we are planning qualitative research, aren't we, to continue digging into this. So this was quantitative research. So we a load of figures, and Bev and Rachel have given us a really helpful overview of what those figures have shown us. But we really want to know more. We want to know more about those joiners. We want to know more about those leavers. And so kind of watch this space, as it were, for future research, which you'll be hearing about in due course. I'd like to suggest that we all just take a couple of minutes. I'm going to stop talking, and you can turn off your cameras if you like, folks. And let's just take a couple of minutes to ask God, what shall I do? What one thing should I do, perhaps, as a result of what I've heard this afternoon? So folks have been sharing some of their experiences in the chat. A couple of people Paul's been saying, the technical difficulties, some people use that as a reason not to do it. And, there are obstacles to overcome there. Let's just take a couple of minutes and ask God, what one thing do you want me to do as a result of today? And we'll gather back together in just a couple of minutes.